thank the Committee of Appropriation and hope that with this budget passed, that the Executive will also ensure a full implementation of the budget for the benefit of Nigerians as a whole.
Vice President Oshibajo meets British Foreign Secretary to discuss cooperation on economy and security.
And today on Good Morning Nigeria, we turn our attention to the Nigerian worker and May Day celebration.
All right, today is May Day, and it's a day that evokes passion amongst workers in almost all parts of the world. And while others look forward to the day with anticipation, others say it's a day for a distress call, as well as a battle cry by workers who are marginalized or shortchanged in the production relations in society.
Of course, Kinsley, you know that those assumptions, they're not really assumptions. They are issues that can be traced to the origin of labor movement. Of course, when it started in those days, when some workers took out to the protest, the wages and of course the hours that they put into work, So that's how labor started, and how it is going these days. In fact, this year's May Day celebration commemorates, of course, the centenary of the International Labour Organization, ILO, which has also become the universal symbol, for labor.
Right, that's right. Now, discourse related to labor matters often will be situated within the context of the prevailing conditions of the working class, who in nearly all cases continue to cite injustice, hardship, deprivation, and inequality in the distribution of wealth in society.
All right, the provisions of the ILO Convention states that, and we'll put in our human beings, irrespective of race, creed, or sex, have the right to pursue material well-being, spiritual development, freedom and dignity, as well as economic security and equal opportunity.
Now, Claire, Nigeria is signatory to labor conventions and recommendations promoting freedom of association, abolition of forced labor, elimination of discrimination, the free choice of employment, as well as just and favorable conditions of work, amongst others.
And as we all know, the Nigerian worker has, have many issues that have been on the table on a day like this, and we can count, of course, issues ranging from inadequate pay to prompt and regular payment, outstanding or non-payment of salaries, and there are quite a number of other issues. But recently, President Muhammadu Buhari, of course, we know, assented to the new minimum wage of 30,000 naira, which is now law in Kingsley. That was the Easter package for Nigerian workers.
That's right, that's right. And of course, celebrations will be taking place today against the background of that development. But this morning, of course, we shall be taking a look at the Nigerian worker again and this year's May Day celebration. What are the other pertinent issues on the table, in addition to those already itemized by my colleague? And what is also being done to improve labor relations in the country?
All right. Now, it is also pertinent to ask not just the workers themselves, but also the labor movement, how much it is reflecting on its own structure with a view to making them more democratic and worker-centered. Is labor walking the talk?
All right, so you've raised pertinent questions, and we shall be joined later on in our conversation segment by an array of guests who will seek to provide responses to those posers. Thank you for joining us on the program today. My name is Kingsley Osadola. It's May Day, but of course we're at work, such as we're also at work on Christmas Day, Boxing Day, and New Year's Day, and indeed all other days.
Holidays, indeed.
That's right.
All right, I'm Claire Adelabu Abdul Razak. Always a pleasure to have you join us here on Good Morning Nigeria. As always, we're broadcasting live on the network service of the NTA in Abuja. Abuja, of course, is Nigeria's capital city. And Chimobi Walton Naji is already seated, and he's ready to bring us the news. But, of course, don't forget, we'll be having the complimentary aspects of this program. But let's join Chimobi right now in the newsroom. Chimobi.
Hello, good morning, and here is the morning news.
Nigeria secures the release of Zainab Ali following the directive by President Muhammadu Buhari to the Ministries of Foreign Affairs and Justice to intervene in the case of Zainab Ali, earlier arrested for alleged involvement in drug trafficking by Saudi Arabian authorities. The Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Mustafa Suleiman, has confirmed her release and that of another Nigerian, Ibrahim Abubakar. Zainab's father has also commended the federal government's proactiveness towards securing the release of his daughter.
Be released to our mission in Saudi, and that is news that I believe will be very, very heartwarming and will be relieving also for both the family and the Nigerians that have had to express their concern and their care about these two Nigerians who found themselves in this situation.
My daughter said she hasn't got any luggage apart from the one they have seen in the hotel room. They said no, there is a bag in her name.
And now to security matters, the chairman of the Universal Basic Education Commission, UBEC, Dr. Muhammad Mahmoud Abubakar, and his daughter, Yasmin Muhammad, who were kidnapped along Kaduna-Abuja Expressway, have been released. A statement by the Force Public Relations Officer, DCP Frank Mba, says one male suspect was arrested in connection with the crime, while an AK-47 rifle was recovered. And still on security, Northern Traditional Rulers Council and a high-powered federal government delegation have met in Kaduna to explore sustainable solutions to the growing security challenges bedeviling the north.
But this is not normal because we have not been used to this in past decades. Now things have gone terribly bad, and we must sit together and find solutions to these problems.
Mr. President's readiness and continuous effort finding solution to the security challenges must be appreciated. He has provided an enabling environment for the armed forces to operate and inspire our forces to attain success in fight against terrorism and insecurity across the country.
The reality remains community policing remains a potent crime control model. However, to give a sustainable effect to the model in Nigeria, they need to integrate it into policing functions at institutional and national level remains imperative.
Now, leadership by example for effective national security was the focus of a lecture delivered by the Chief of Defense Staff, General Abayomi Olonishaki, aimed at developing strategic thinking at the Defense College, Abuja.
This lecture is well-timed and apt and should agitate your minds and equip you toward evolving new leadership concepts that will facilitate the tackling of the various national security challenges.
And a meeting between Vice President of Nigeria, Yemi Osinbajo, and the United Kingdom's Foreign Secretary Department for International Development, Jeremy Hunt, is providing opportunity to take stock of Nigeria's priorities in improving the business environment and security, with particular focus on the Northeast. A new pact on economic development was entered into by both countries at the meeting.
Together to ensure that we foster the right environment to grow the level of bilateral trade and investment between our countries. As a government, we are not unmindful of the challenges that have hindered business and investment, the business and investment environment. We have taken these challenges as opportunities and have made the extensive build-out of modern infrastructure, both hard and soft, as the main thrust of our administration's plans going forward, especially in the last 2 years and going forward in the next term of this administration.
And to other stories now, the Senate has passed the 2019 appropriation bill of 8.9 trillion naira. The Senate retained the oil benchmark of $60 per barrel, 2.3 million barrel oil production per day, and an exchange rate of 305 naira per dollar. The House of Representatives also considered and adopted report of the Committee on Appropriations on a bill for an act to authorize the issue from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation the sum of 8.916 trillion naira appropriation for the 2019 fiscal year ending 31st December 2019.
This is as a result of the provision for the severance benefits of the outgoing legislators and legislative aides, the induction and orientation, as well as inauguration of new legislators, all of which occur only once in 4 years, but were inadvertently not captured in 2019 budget proposal. There was also the need to provide more funds for the security and intelligence agencies.
Northeast Intervention Fund. What exactly does that mean? Is it meant for the Northeast Development Commission or is going to another organization?
The Intervention Fund is meant to be utilized by the newly established Northeast Development Commission.
And to other stories, the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations, NIPR, has inducted 170 new members with a charge for them to make integrity, professionalism and excellence paramount as they engage in communication that is founded on truth, reliability and responsibility.
I believe you know that the practice of public relations, by whatever name, is a criminal offense in the Nigerian statutes without certification by this institute.
Our charge first to the new members is to adhere by the professional code.
And those are the stories for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Claire after this break. Do stay with us.
What we are really cultivating here is a better future for all Nigerian women. And it's not always easy. Panadol Extra relieves headache, backache, joint pain, toothache, and menstrual pain. The pain is worth it.
NTA Television College Jos announces admissions into 2 years diploma programs in film and television production, television engineering, and broadcast journalism. The sale of forms will commence on the 13th of May and run through 30th July 2019. Admission forms can be obtained from all marketing offices, NTA state capital stations, zonal centers, or at the office of the academic secretary, NTA Television College, Rayfield, Jos. Applicants are required to possess 5 credits in GCE or SSCE in relevant areas of study in not more than 2 sittings, including English and mathematics. All properly completed forms attached with photocopies of credentials must be submitted on or before 30th July 2019. For further inquiries, please visit our website at ntatvc.com or call 0803 3144 383.
NTA TV College, training you to be the best you want to be.
Registrar, Announcer.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, time to check trending business news this morning, and Kulu Mohammed is standing by.
Economic diversification is business-oriented, which implies that entrepreneurship is one of the mechanisms for economic diversification in Nigeria, as distinct from management, entrepreneurship is the creation of new enterprises to meet new challenges and opportunities presented by a given situation. In this case, instability in the prices of crude oil. Away from management, the right vocations need to be gone into on a sustainable basis in order to arrive Nigeria's economy at the Macintosh of instability in the global prices of crude oil. Experts say entrepreneurship is beyond buying and selling. It requires innovative reapplication of innovation in the art of business transaction.
Entrepreneurship, you can leave the ship and let us come out with the entrepreneurs first. But we remember a ship, it has a characteristic of moving. Every entrepreneur should never be stagnant. That is what will make entrepreneurship to be entrepreneurship. No stagnancy. And do you know the reason why? The entrepreneurs, they are innovators. And they are being creative on every moment. On anything you see, they see it differently. But there is a misconception in Nigeria. In most cases in Nigeria now, people think only when you are having a skill acquisition, you acquire a skill, you are a tailor, you are this. No, that is not entrepreneurship. That is just a quantum part of entrepreneurship. Let me be sincere with you. Entrepreneurship is holistic. And when we talk about being holistic, it's a design model in which when you are in it, you'll be happy with yourself. Entrepreneurship cut across everything you can think of. As I'm talking to you, if I'm talking in a different way, I can become an entrepreneur. So it's from services to goods, to tangible goods that you can imagine. But the main thing is that what is in existence is what you are adding values to that can guarantee you to become an entrepreneur.
And finally, a total of 4,682 deals were traded on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, valued at 8.9 trillion naira. Market capitalization stands at 10.9 trillion naira. CCNN led the top traded equities, valued at 1.85 billion naira, followed by FBNH and Unilever Nigerian PLC. That's business news at this time. I'm Kolo Muhammad. Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you very much for the business news on Good Morning Nigeria. Next for us now is a review of some of the papers we have this morning.
All right, welcome back. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service, and Bayo Toyobe is right with us in the studio. Bayo, happy Workers' Day.
Yes, solidarity will rent the air today. Is May Day. Good morning, Claire. Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria. And happy Workers' Day to all Nigerians who toil to get our nation working.
All right. Bayo, thanks. Of course, let's take a look at the stories on the front pages of the papers. Beginning with the Daily Trust newspaper. Daily Trust newspaper, the lead story says, with a kicker, alleged drug trafficking, why Zainab was freed by Saudi authorities. With the rider, how my daughter was arrested. That's according to the mother. And you see the photograph of the young Zainab there, sandwiched between officials of the Nigerian mission in Jeddah. That's the photograph of Zainab with officials of the Nigerian mission in Jeddah. How my daughter was arrested. You find the stories, of course, on the front page with a jump to page 5. Below the nameplate of the Daily Trust newspaper, you have National Assembly passes 8.9 trillion naira 2019 budget. That's page 3. Abducted UBEC chairman and daughter freed. That's page 6. And federal government, states and local governments shared 617.5 that should be billion naira for March. Details on page 3. Now, right at the foot of the front page of the paper, it says, that's of the Daily Trust newspaper still, it says 1,071 Nigerians killed and 685 kidnapped in 4 months. And the story is attributed to the Acting Inspector General of Police. 685 Nigerians kidnapped in 4 months. Details on page 4. Buhari to Atiku, that's the kicker. I didn't award election materials contract to APC member, page 13. The bread price may rise by 10%. Find out details on page 16. Claire.
Kingsley, that story on Zainab, of course, is the picture of the young lady, and it's right there on the front page of all the papers. Daily Independent has it. It's a lead picture story on the front page, and you can also read it up there. But the Daily Independent has other lead stories on its front page, beginning with senators, reps to get 23.6 billion severance pay, allowances, and a number of riders accompanying that story. And it's a busy front page. Just below the picture story, I'm ready for arrest, Ayo Adebajo, Des FG. Of course, there are other riders following it. But let me take some of the trending stories on the right column. This one is on page 7. I killed my girlfriend's family members for aborting pregnancy. That's by the arsonist, page 7, I said earlier on. How federal government secured release of Zainab Aliyu from Saudi detention. You can read it up on page 10. And 4 killed as train crushes tricycle in Lagos, page 41. Kidnapped, Ubek chairman and daughter regain freedom. Just take you above the nameplate. Boko Haram invades Adamawa community, kills 26 and burns houses. CBN moves to flood markets with lower bank notes, and a rider there to mop up over circulated and mutilated notes. You can read up all that on page 11. Now, Atiku, PDP salute workers over role in nation building, page 41. And reps order arrest of RMFAC acting chairman. It's there on page 41. I think we have similar stories on the front page of the blueprint. We'll just allow Bayo to, I know Bayo, today is May Day. Which one is the interesting story for you?
Well, first of all, let's start and say today is May Day and the rant of solidarity who rent the air. Congratulations to the Nigerian labor unions and the fact that the minimum wage bill has been passed and there's a lot of pressure and expectation from workers. But be that as it may, there's good news in the home of Zainab Aliyu following her release for alleged false possession of drug. This was tagged to her baggage and she had no knowledge about it. She was arrested while in the Holy Land for Lesser Hajj. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs was able to establish her innocence and she has been released. Her package was padded with another containing illicit drug without her knowledge. Also arrested is an 80-year-old man, Ibrahim Abubakar, whose baggage was also tagged in the same circumstance. He is to be released today. 7 persons have been arrested at Malam Aminu Kano International Airport as a syndicate. The culprit who actually the drugs were traced to is said to be on the run. His name is said to be Gabbari. Meanwhile, Dr. Mohammed Abubakar, the chairman of the Universal Basic Education Commission, who was abducted with his daughter, has also been released. They were abducted on Monday afternoon along the Kaduna-Abuja highway. His driver, unfortunately, was shot and killed at that incident. The kidnappers had demanded 13 million ransom. It is not known whether the ransom was paid before they were released. Talking about statistics, excuse me, the Acting Inspector General of Police has presented to a meeting of Northern traditional rulers that 1,071 persons have been killed in the first quarter of this year alone from violence around the country. There are also 685 that had been kidnapped within that same period. This brings it to about 12 persons on a day on the average, while about 5 persons have been kidnapped on the average every day. 769 persons, he says, were killed in the north. 436 deaths were recorded in northwest, 250 from north central. South-south has registered 130. Most of these Nigerians resulted from banditry and communal violence. Northwest recorded the highest of about 365 that were kidnapped. Meanwhile, the central bank has refuted the alarm raised that Nigeria could be sliding into a recession. This pronouncement, you all recall, was raised by the chairman of the Governors Forum, Governor Abdulaziz Yari, while at the induction of the governors-elect. Central Bank says currently the economy is experiencing a steady marginal growth and also coming out of high inflation rates. So the expectation is that hopefully by the end of the year, the inflation rate will become a single digit. The central bank says that all things being equal, by the end of 2019, our GDP growth will be between 2.8 to 3%. So everybody should be rest assured recession is not knocking at our doors.
All right, so the economists will still have to discuss that further so that we understand the basis of the claim by the chairman of the Governors Forum. Let's take a look at the Nigerian pilot. We have headlines similar to what we read from the other papers. But May Day, Saraki lauds workers' contribution to national development. That's page 12. We cannot celebrate Zainab's release and forget Leah Sharibu. That's according to the Christian Association of Nigeria. It is on page 8. Now, this lead stories, of course, is on the passage of the 2019 appropriation bill by the National Assembly, and you have a number of writers there, including one that states that the National Assembly will transmit the appropriation bill to President Buhari on Thursday. Below the photograph on the front page of the paper, we've saved 250 billion naira since implementing IPPIS, says Oyoita, who is the head of service of the Federation. Dangote asks private sector to support federal government and states in funding tertiary education. Curtis lays siege to Obosi, that's Emeka Anyanku's Anambra community. It is on page 12. Buhari, most labor-friendly president, says Ngige, as Nigeria marks Workers' Day. And Amnesty International, rights activists condemn discriminatory arrest of prostitutes. That's page 12. And Acting Inspector General of Police to address Senate on Tuesday over insecurity.
I think, Bayo, just a few one from the blueprint front page. Of course, it says on top of the nameplate there, claim your dividends. SEC urges deceased investors, beneficiaries. Details of that on page 34. And only 17% drugs in Nigeria substandard. That's coming from NAFDAC, page 17. And trending at the bottom of the paper, we have the story on the release of Zainab Aliyu by the Saudi authorities there. And then Cameroon war. Cross-river refugee camps face imminent crisis, page 14. Then 2.78 million workers die from occupational hazards annually. Details of that on page 9. Defection, Saraki, Dogara, 52 others, no fate, May 17.
This is because there's already a case in court about the fate of people who jump ship from one political party to the other. Meanwhile, the National Assembly has passed the 2019 budget. The budget is 8.916 trillion. It was transmitted to the National Assembly on 7th November. This is the fastest passage that the 2019 budget has ever seen since the advent of this administration. The least we've had in the past is a period of 6 months. And it could have been less, considering the fact that the National Assembly has closed down for a long time on recess because of the elections. So what does that point to? Where there is a will, there is a way. From the MTEF, most of the parameters were maintained. That is crude oil production at 2.3 million barrels a day, exchange rate at $305, while oil benchmark is at $60. However, the capital expenditure went up to stood at 2.09 trillion. Recurrent expenditure 4.05 trillion. Statutory transactions is 502 billion, while fiscal deficit is 1.9 trillion. There's good news for labor. 160 billion is provided for in the budget to take care of new minimum wage.
Let's quickly...
That is for the federal government workers.
Yes.
Okay, that's actually the thrust of this editorial, Kingsley and Bayo. It's on the implementation of the new minimum wage taken from Nigerian Pilot editorial, and raises some questions. But of course, it also talks about the provisions of the Act. In 3 paragraphs there, it tells us what the Act empowers, both the employer and the employee, all there. But again, the question the paper is raising is, will all the state government and private sector operators implement the Act indeed? Are frequently exploited private sector workers in particular knowledgeable about their labor rights? And when will government make the Act available to members of the public? There are about 3 or 4, issues, concerns that this editorial has raised.
Yes, actually, the editorial is saying that the euphoria that has rented the air might not last long, in the sense that questions are asked whether some, particularly state government, will be able to pay. It's not a question of ability to pay now. There is a law in place, and if it is not implemented or violated, prosecution can also follow. The editorial is asking 3 questions. It is saying that if violated, what becomes of it? The subject is the subject of a prosecution, and it says that are private sector workers aware of their legal rights? Well, they should be enlightened by labor and their other unions that it is their prerogative. If they are underpaid according to the law has been violated and they can seek results. It also says that when will government make the Act available? When an Act is passed, it is subject to be gazetted, and when it is gazetted, it is published, and it becomes a public property. The law is subsisting, and even if there is any ground for anybody indicating or knowing that somebody has violated it, he can go to court and seek prosecution. But the editorial is also happening on the fact that the euphoria should not be taken away by the challenges of the market forces that could make the marginal increase become a mirage. It has also talked about Nigeria's problem are not always the laws that we have. It has always been the subject of implementation.
Ayo, just before we leave, just one point on the demand for the publication of the new Minimum Wage Act. As you rightly observed, once it is gazetted, then of course it is deemed to have been published. The government, or no government, will come and be distributing copies of the Gazette to you. A Gazette is printed and published by the Federal Ministry of Information, and it is for sale, usually for a token amount. So if you are interested to get the original copy, not the ones you find them publishing and selling, that's right. You go to the Ministry of Information
or government printer
and get a copy of it. You pay for it. It's like a newspaper. It's actually government's, publication. It's official Gazette, which is the one you can actually tender as evidence, whenever the matter arises. That's a very significant point that you raised there. I just wondered, there was a story clear there, but the photograph wasn't shown, or it wasn't well illustrated. You find the story also on page 28 of Daily Trust newspaper. And it says, I set my girlfriend's 9 family members ablaze because she aborted my pregnancy. And this story is coming from Okitupupa local government area of Ondo State. The gentleman is 45 years old. He's a palm wine tapper. And this incident happened. And unfortunately, the lady whom he said aborted the pregnancy survived, the blaze. She's the only survivor of that particular blaze that occurred in the incident. So, of course, after the incident happened, he fled to Ijebu, where a manhunt was organized, and then he was picked up while he was wandering around.
Yeah, just another cartoon from the same editorial, just before we end, the Nigerian Pilot, just on the editorial page. This cartoon, of course, is talking about what should be done to the Nigerian officials, at the airport who planted the drug on Zainab's, of course, luggage. And this also shows you that, how informed Nigerians are now about what is happening. It says, it's right there. It says, the first man on the right says, if you were FG, what will you do to those security officials who implanted drug in that innocent student bag at the airport? And this other man, of course, discussing over some bottles. We don't know whether they are green or whatever color. It says, Chai, I'd secure her release first. which has been done. Then the next thing he says will be cut off those Nigerian officials' hands, then hand them over to Saudi officials for further action.
Yes. They ought to be excited to go and face the consequences.
Absolutely.
But at least another thing is that they have a system. They have tagged the bag to somebody who didn't know about it. There must have been a system by which they will collect the bag.
Precisely.
There should have been vigilance to monitor who would come and collect the bag.
That's very, very important. You know, there was an incident that happened in the 90s involving a first-class traditional ruler in the Southwest, whose bag was also tampered with. It was on a Cameroon Airlines flight. This story was widely reported then in the 90s.
And we must say that this lady is quite lucky. There might have been others who were not so lucky and who, have been killed.
Credit must go to her father. Yeah. Her father took it on, went and reported to the NDLA and insisted, and NDLA investigated. And in fact, they have evidence on WhatsApp of the person who sent those drugs and the baggage and their colors on the phones of the persons who were concerned.
Absolutely. So they got them. I'm sure that
the
place of offense is Nigeria. So the Nigerian law will take its course, unless the Saudis are requesting for extradition, and you can be sure what the consequences will be if they get to Saudi Arabia. Now, Jigawa farmers, for them, feather, that is feather from birds, that's their new manure, and it is being treated as gold.
Wow.
Feather?
Feather, yes.
Feather.
Absolutely. Manure in Jigawa State, page 26. Maya, Workers' Day, May Day, thank you for being with us. See you again tomorrow.
I'm a retired worker, but I have solidarity with workers.
All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we'll go ahead to discuss matters on workers and their conditions in Nigeria.
On behalf of the management and staff of the Federal Ministry of Labour and Employment, as well as its parastatals, I wish to send warm felicitations to Nigerian workers on the occasion of the 2019 Workers' Day. Theme of this year's celebration, another 100 years of struggle for jobs, dignity and social justice in Nigeria. The celebration also coincides with the centenary celebration of the International Labour Organization, which Nigeria proudly pioneered as the first country office in Africa. While I sincerely salute the resilience of the nation's workforce and its numerous contributions to national development, we owe plenty accolades to the most labor-friendly president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. As we move to the next level, I have no doubt that things will get better. I wish you all a productive and fulfilling Workers' Day celebration. Long live Nigerian workers. Long live the Federal Ministry of Labour and Employment. Long live the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Senator Dr. Chris Nwabweze Ngige, Honorable Minister of Labour and Employment. Announcer.
Hold it! Me, I don't comot my hand from oil bunkering.
General, what you gonna yarn? What did the yarn serve? I don't understand though.
Because they spoil our water and our environment. And they cause our people serious harm. Militants is there. You know good. Me, I not do again Sam. Because why? Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
These days, people get their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored, and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous. Whether you do it for fun or for political gains, real people can get hurt. Fake news, don't create it, don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA.
All right, welcome again to the program. It's Good Morning Nigeria We've been celebrating days, this day, that day, those days. But today is our day. It's Nigerian Workers' Day, and of course, it's called May Day commemoration. And for a background report to get us into our discussion, here is Kunle Adeye.
Issues of improved workers' welfare and better conditions of service have always reverberated during the celebration of Workers' Day in Nigeria. In recent times, one protracted issue between the federal and state governments with the organized labor is the new minimum wage. The matter was laid to rest on the 18th April 2019 when President Muhammadu Buhari formally signed into law Nigeria's new minimum wage. This development implies that the least paid worker in the country will henceforth take home nothing less than 30,000 naira monthly. The organized labor consequently described the development as cheering but long overdue and called for immediate implementation. Aside from the minimum wage, there are still very serious issues that labor continue to put on the table during the May Day celebration, which include casualization, safety of workers, and other welfare issues which go beyond the minimum wage. Going by the recent rumor of increase in tax to fund the new minimum wage, which government has described as unfounded, the organized labor continues to call for more prudence and transparency in management of public resources, which they believe will impact on the society as a whole. The 2019 May Day could also provide a platform for labor to raise other issues that relate to governance in general as they reflect on the recent general elections. Many also say that the labor itself needs to use the moment to re-examine itself as it has a lot of house cleaning to do. As guests on Good Morning Nigeria speak on the Labor Day, some questions that require answers include: what is the role of the labor in national development, and to what extent can it propel the change that every Nigerian yearns for?
All right, thank you very much, Kunle Adeye, there for that background. We have with us the studios to discuss this issue in further detail. The president of the Nigeria Labour Congress, Comrade Ayuba Waba. Comrade, pleasure to have you with us in our studios.
Thank you. Good morning and happy Workers' Day, Nigerian workers.
All right. Also here with us in the studios, we'd like to welcome Mr. Dan Neburago, who is Director of Employment in the Ministry of Labour and Employment. That's the Federal Ministry, of course, of Labour and Employment. Mr. Neburago, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
All right, and we also have here in the studio Musa Lawal, who is the Secretary General of Trade Union Congress, TUC. Thank you very much for joining us.
Happy May Day to all.
And let's go to our Benin Network Center. And we have Professor of Law and former Dean, Faculty of Law, University of Benin, Professor Richard Idubo. Professor Idubo, many thanks to you.
Very much, Claire. And to the Nigerian workers, I wish you the very best.
All right, gentlemen, once again, happy Workers' Day. But let's begin by getting the comments of the president of the NLC. In your opinion, what best summarizes the mood and state of the Nigerian worker on a day such as this?
Well, as usual, May Day is a day set aside, one, to celebrate the contribution of workers to national development, and two, also to look at how workers have fared in the last 1 year, and also raise issues about how we can be able to contribute, because we create the wealth, how the economy can be fashioned in such a way that there will be social justice. So clearly speaking, you know for sure that workers have not had it very easy because of the changing dynamics in our economy, and whatever affects the economy directly affects workers that are actually on fixed pay. So clearly speaking, I think it has been a mixed feeling. Well, we can say now that the new minimum wage have been signed into law, possibly there will be some respite. But clearly, I think the challenge and the vagaries in the economy have affected clearly the purchasing power of ordinary Nigerian worker. And in most cases also, because workers also, side by side, you look at the issue of pensioners. So clearly from what we have been able to see, particularly arising from the challenge in the economy, certainly I think we are not yet there. And while celebrating their contribution to national development, we'll also raise those issues that we think are fundamental because the worker that create the wealth must also be taken care of. And also there should be social justice in the system where even citizens can be able to have a decent life. That's the whole essence of governance. It's about security and welfare of the entire people. So clearly speaking, this is where we are, and it's not yet Uhuru, because even the minimum wage is yet to be in our pockets. Until it's in our pockets, we now begin to see the impact of it. But for now, I think this is where we are. So much to be done, and so much is still expected from those workers that have continued to toy and also lubricate the process of production and the process of creating wealth in our system. So certainly this has been the issue in the past 1 year. We have engaged a lot of issues of casualization, issues of non-regular payment of entitlement, because in the past, the issue of payment of wages is actually taken for granted. We shouldn't be celebrating people that actually pay salary. It's taken for granted, but now it's an issue because our elites no longer prioritize workers' welfare. And that is where we are. If not in the past, your leave grant, you don't ask for it. Your monthly salary, you don't ask for it. Once you work, because you have worked, it's expected that you should be able to be paid. But clearly in some of those establishments, both public and private, particularly state and local government, the issue of salary has become an issue. And therefore, it is really a situation that have affected a lot of workers. Take, for instance, the issue of Kogi, where we're talking of 38 months. I heard he was saying 4 months. It's never thought of that a worker will work, a pensioner will retire at the end of 30 days, nothing to take care of his family. Some of them are dying. Some of their children are out of school. They can't pay their rent. It's really a situation that we need to look at it, and we are going to canvass for some of those things we didn't do and that we need to do to keep our system abreast with developments around the world, and also ensure that decent work agenda is implemented to the latter. We cannot have peace if there is no sustainable development and if there is no actually issue of social justice. In fact, the foundation of ILO, the Constitution in 1944, made the issue of social justice as a panacea to peace around the world. Where you have social justice, there will be peace. Where there is no social justice, where some people are living in affluence and few cannot have 1 meal per day, then both the person that is hungry and the person that have more than enough, all of them will be sleeping with their eyes open. Because the person that have had 1 meal per day certainly will be awake. And the person that have accumulated so much will also be awake because he's afraid that what will be the situation tomorrow. And that is actually the situation we're in. And we need to change these dynamics. We need to change narrative. We need to bring about social justice. We need to ensure that workers that create the wealth are well taken care of. And importantly, pensioners that are put in their best in the service of our country. They need to be taken care of.
Okay, comrade, let's, you've delved into some of the issues. You outlined 2 major areas, of course, contribution to national development and how workers have fared. But let us look at today precisely. I know a lot of workers will file out, both at the national and subnational levels, at the different venues, to do the routine march past and all that. Like Kingsley asked earlier on, what will the workers be saying? Will it be a mood of appreciation, satisfaction, or what are we expecting from? Are we going to hear more chants of, solidarity and all that?
Yes. First, there will be appreciation because the minimum wage law have been signed, assented to by Mr. President. For the past 4 years, this has been a very topical issue. You remember in 2007, the workers had to disrupt the May Day when nothing was coming forth. So clearly there will be appreciation.
Today?
Because the law had been signed, and the law certainly is the first instrument that will be used to ensure that workers benefit from the minimum wage. So it will be appreciation, actually, which as leaders will also capture that. But 2, we will not also shy away from raising contemporary issues in the world of work. Issues of occupational health and safety, issues of casualization, which is now ravaging the entire private sector. Take, for instance, the banks. You are working, but the bank is not your employer. It's an outsourced service. It's a precarious work. You are sacked at will. And those are issues that we must continue to engage them. There is no social justice even at the place of work. Whereas Nigeria is one of the few countries that have domesticated the two core conventions of ILO as far back as 1960. ILO Convention 98 and 87 that guarantee the right of a worker to collective bargaining. You collectively bargain with your employer, your condition of service, and also the right to belong to a trade union. In many of those precarious work situations, they don't want unions to exist. They don't even want workers. You remember we engaged MTN on those sundry issues. So clearly those are issues that will also engage and will also demand that those issues are addressed during our May Day. Because it's not only about celebrating the resilience, because the essence of the May Day is actually to celebrate the resilience of workers. Despite the challenge, they have kept faith with the system. They have continued to contribute their quota. Some working in precarious conditions, where even the minimum requirement for them to be able to work is not there. Yet the issue of productivity is there. They say a worker is not productive. When a worker is supposed to have a brand new computer to work, the computer is not there, but the blame is now on the worker that is not productive. Give him the necessary tool, the necessary working environment, the necessary incentive. Encourage him. Then the Nigerian worker is seen all around the world as very productive, as somebody that have remained very resilient. And that's why our workers around the world, people are sorting after them. You heard of recent people coming from outside the country to look for medical doctors too. Because Nigerian workers are hardworking and resilient. Okay. That have been tested around the world.
All right, President, thanks a lot. Again, the number of the issues that you have raised are matters that we'll explore further in the course of this conversation. Let's bring in now the Secretary General of the Trade Union Congress. That's Comrade Musa Lawal. Comrade Musa Lawal, from your perspective, tell us what is the mood of workers on May Day 2019?
Well, like I said, it's one of first appreciation. Then, of course, the thought of survival is very important in our minds. Today, we are what we will call the workers now are now on a mission that you can't survive on your salary, which is a very big problem. First, the salary is not even enough. Yet, you must carry all the family members along with the salary because most people, due to unemployment, are not working. So even as we celebrate that we have got new minimum wage, we are very set in our minds that the task ahead is very hard. Every worker who has a family of 4, then he may have brothers and sisters who have graduated from universities and are not working. Then all these people will have to work around the minimum wage that is being given. It's a precarious situation. If unemployment had been reduced and you now work and use your own money for yourself, it will be better. Now you work for yourself and for others, even within these limited resources. It's a very dangerous thing for our workers today. We're like, we're like a situation where we are degenerating. We are not moving forward. A worker 30 years ago is better, it has a better life than a worker today. That is the situation we're having on our hand. You earn 30,000 naira now, then all the family members, the students you have paid school fees for, that have gone to school, are back home eating with you from the same salary. That is the issue.
All right, thank you, TUC Secretary.
I'm sorry, it was said 30 years ago. 30 years ago, Nigeria had anti-SAP riots spearheaded by workers.
But, sir, 30 years ago, Nigeria had SAP riots because that was a transition from normal economy to a SAP economy. But even at that time, it's better than today.
Well, I don't know if Mr. Dan Neburago, who is the Director of Productivity at the Ministry of Labour and Employment, you've heard what, of course, the two Labour leaders have said. From your perspective as government, would you say that the Nigerian worker has come to the stage where he or she can say the worst is over?
Well, thank you very much. One thing about the May Day that we are celebrating today, which is principally a workers' affair, is that we in government also are part and parcel of the process of the celebration of the May Day. And also, it's also a day for the continuation of the struggle too, because I quite agree with them that even though we are celebrating, the struggle is still there, the struggle to enthrone decent work, the struggle to promote sustainable livelihoods and sustainable development, because the workers are the people who are baking the cake, who are the ones that lay the golden egg that leads to progress in the country. So I agree with them, but we in government, basically, because every government official is basically a worker. So we cannot run away from the fact that we are also part of the struggle. I'm a worker, Mr. President is also a worker, the Minister of Labor is a worker. So we are all collectively involved in this process to ensure that the livelihoods of Nigerian workers are improved, to ensure that there is decent work, to ensure that there's fundamental principles and right at work is enthroned, because without that, of course, the economy cannot grow. We cannot have sustainable enterprises in the country. We cannot have sustainable development. So it is good. That is essentially why we are here. And we felt, too, that maybe it would have been nice if you had brought in the tripod, because in labor relations, we operate on the basis of the tripartism, where you have the government, you have the workers, and you have the employers, so that we can collectively see how we take stock of the progress that has been made so far and how we can move forward. The basic element is a tripartism. And the essence of doing the process through we do this is through social dialogue.
Are we not complete here? Because you are from the ministry, so you are a representative of government here. And of course, we have the two labor leaders, and of course, you have staff, workers, Nigerian worker. So I think we've got a well-balanced, flow.
Well, if you look at it from that perspective, but I'm sure that the workers know what I'm talking about, because at every forum we go to, we sit on the basis of a tripod, and you are part of the workers, not so? You are the moderator of this program, I guess.
But let's, Mr. Neburago, I hope we got that, Neburago. I mean, the point is that the Honorable Minister of Labour and Employment was supposed to be on this program, and you were nominated from the ministry to be here. You are wearing two hats, as it were. You're standing in for Labour, and then you're standing in for the Ministry of Labour, and you're also an employee. As you also indicated, the President himself is an employee of the Federal Republic. Same thing with the Minister. But your point is noted. Let's go over now to our Benin Network studios, where we are introduced Professor Richard Idubo. Of course, he's a professor of law and former dean of the Faculty of Law. He had also had experience in the Federal Ministry of Labour and Productivity, as it used to be called in those days. Professor Richard Idubo, you listened to, shall we say, the litany of issues articulated by the President of the NLC and the Secretary General of the TUC. Some persons would say that under current conditions, we're having an employer's paradise and a worker's nightmare. What's your take on the state and status of the Nigerian worker today?
Kingsley, but kindly allow me to appreciate at great extent the contribution of the leaders of the workers as here represented by Bawaba, comrade, and the secretary to the other side, that is the TUC. I appreciate that he has spoken so well. He's gone to the roots. This time last year, we were quaking because we had no acquaintance with tomorrow. The demand slammed on government was 58,000, if I remember so well, minimum wage. But the spirit of give and take made it possible for us to arrive at what we arrived today. And so, to that extent, we want to thank the organized labor. We want to thank National Assembly. But above all, we want to thank federal government, by which I mean the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, for shunning intimidation and going ahead to assent. We have come this way, 39,000 minimum wage. Even though it is still inadequate, we ought to remember where we are coming from. A man looking for happiness exclusively for himself may never get it. But we also want to say, he who ignores the past may lose not only the present, but also the future. We just got 30,000 naira and we are celebrating. I join in the celebration. But I am worried. I'm worried that we seem to have lost sight of a number of things that will make it impossible of attainment. 30,000 naira minimum wage, and that would be for people in the lowest rung of the ladder. We went through this kind of situation in 1991, verging on 1992, when, at that time, federal government, as headed by General Babangida, increased the minimum wage by 100%. The implication was far-reaching and devastating. And we went ahead. I was in the service then. And as a member of the Association of Senior Civil Servants of the Federation of Nigeria, we thought that was hostile. Yet we are not against minimum wage. But if there must be minimum wage, there are certain persons were alienated. The relativity ratio at the time, which has been allowed to remain there, is 1 to 9.2. That is the difference, the gap between the lowest paid and the highest paid, 1 to 9.2. By that increase, the relativity ratio was condensed to 1 to 4.6, a situation that was inimical to the growth and could destroy productivity consciousness in those who are alienated from this minimum wage. I think that was the rationale for coming back to the table. We went ahead. I took part in the strike. I led the strike action in Bender State here to cause federal government to do something, to accommodate such of the workers that were alienated. Behold, by 1993, we got it. I am thinking that federal government is also in a position to stand by to allow this to go upwards. It's not cascading now. It must go across the board if it has to have any meaning at all. The workers we are talking about now, quite unfortunately, the definition of the term worker is exclusionary in our labor law. Comrade Ayuba Waba must know this, and the secretary to the TUC must also know this. I entreat that effort be made. This is a government, as we are told, will change agenda. It must change it all so as to make it relevant to the workforce. The only statute that impacts positively on contract of employment today, the main statute, is the Labor Act. But embarrassingly, the Labor Act is exclusionary in its definition of the term worker. Go to section 91 of the Labor Act. It defines worker to exclude, amongst others, and one vital area now, anybody exercising administrative, executive, technical, and professional function, or professional function as public officers or otherwise. It means, therefore, that a level 7 officer in the federal public service, and I suppose you know that government is the largest employer, a level 7 officer, even though he is not even in the position, he still benefits from, minimally from 30,000 naira. Is alienated from the definition of the term worker. What then can you talk about all other categories of the workforce who are alienated by the definition? This same statute is the one that has been allowed to accommodate otherwise purposive contribution from the ILO conventions, such as Convention 98, which Ayuba Waba talked about a moment ago, the freedom to organize, etc., and to bargain collectively. In that very Labor Act, which excludes anybody exercising administrative, executive, technical, or professional function, that one that was intended, that provision that was intended to endure to the advantage of all workers, no matter the status, is located in a law that defines workers in its exclusionary sense. And that is anti-workers victimization provision. Go and look at that section, section 9, subsection 6 of the Labor Act. It is intended by those who made that collective bargaining convention, 98, to endure to the advantage of any worker all over. But it is limited, domesticated in a law that excludes very many people from being styled workers. I am worried if we cannot bring about a redefinition of the term worker, if we cannot cause government to redefine, and then the statute to come out with a public bill to redefine worker, then we are missing it. Very many people would have been alienated. We are celebrating. I am a worker. I've spent 47 years continuously now, and because I am a professor, I will breast the tape when I'm 70. I am a worker, but I am excluded. If I'm even talking about those who are level 7, the lowest rung, excluded, such as I am excluded from the definition of the term worker. The only statute that is relevant to us this very moment is the one that came in 2010. The definition of the term employee there ought to be the same definition internalized in Labor Act, if it must have any meaning to all of us who are celebrating minimum wage today. There are many provisions in that statute which are limited there. Falai and Evans Brothers Nigeria Limited, their Court of Appeal says, for the purpose of the Labor Act, that section that has to do with termination of employment at the initiative convention, at the initiative of the employer, which is section 20, redundancy that is. Falai was not a worker for the purpose of the Labor Act. All we can imagine is what will happen if trade union is expected to negotiate on behalf of such workers. They are not workers as such, because we are operating within the rules. We cannot run away from it. The trade unionists who are seated here, and I appreciate them, they have their legal status, the legal status of trade union that makes them to function. And therefore, we all must comply with the rules. The law is there. But if the law is hostile, as I have drawn attention to, it behoves all of us, therefore, to do something to make it relevant. I'm stating the law as it is. I know the law as it ought to be. But when we have conventions that are adopted, but which are not domesticated, which are not ratified here, they are persuasive, are not binding on any country. They are persuasive. They are only persuasive. And therefore, we must do everything to have them domesticated. And the starting point is to change and redefine the term worker. Thank you very much. I hope I will have opportunity to illuminate the point.
Professor Richard Idubo, thank you. Thank you for all that you have said. Of course, all that you have brought out forward, there are legal issues which I cannot speak to. Kingsley here, thankfully, it's a lawyer who will be able to speak it. But let me talk about... Musa Lawal is also a lawyer, so they will react to some of the issues that you've raised. But as a worker, I like to speak to the issue of exclusion. And Comrade, the NLC leader, Comrade Waba, I'd like you to talk to us. With regards to the minimum wage, what category of worker is captured or not captured? Or does it cover all workers?
Thank you very much. I think he has flagged off so many issues. The first issue is about the issue of our labor law, which is quite a different issue altogether.
Precisely.
The issue of the practice of the minimum wage is also something different altogether. On the issue of the laws, certainly some of our laws are obsolete. And the process of review by the tripartite is actually ongoing. We have made some progress, and once we're able to dot the I's and the T's, it will actually be forwarded to the National Assembly. About the two main conventions he mentioned, Nigeria ratified Convention 87 and 98 as far back as 1960. In fact, the issue of freedom of association is even contained in our Constitution, Section 40. Section 40, which deals with freedom of association, is direct interpretation of the Convention 98. So, but the issue of definition of worker, which is part of the old law, is something that is ongoing, which is undergoing review, of which we are mindful of that, and we are following the process, and you have found out that Labour have been very consistent in actually being part of the process of reviewing those laws. Mm-hmm. Now, on the issue of the minimum wage, let him not also forget that this is not the first time we're actually implementing the minimum wage. The minimum wage was first implemented in 1981 via an act of parliament. There have been procedure, there have been practice. Once a minimum wage is approved, the issue of relativity goes together with it. Because by now, we even expect that Salaries and Wages Commission will have come up with guideline and circular, including the consequential increase, including a table to guide. Because if you move somebody from 18,000 to 30,000, certainly the person of 30,000, it will have a consequential effect, which usually is the practice. And it's the work of Salaries and Wages Commission, because it has the technical competence, is empowered by law to do all of this. And the process is like this. Once the law is signed into law as done by the Mr. President, it will be gazetted. I suppose by now it should have been gazetted. Once it is gazetted, Justice will send it to the SGF. SGF will transmit it to the Salaries and Wages Commission to do the needful. And therefore, a circular will be issued to all ministries, departments, and agencies as guideline. And it will have all of this. So I think we shouldn't model the three issues together.
But who are capped? Yes, who are those that are, that are entitled to benefit from the increment?
Yeah, everybody will benefit because
all
from the
category
table
of staff, from zero
if it
level.
is from the tradition we have known from 1981. That's why I said there will be a table. Level 1, step 1 is now 30,000. If before now, 30,000 is for level 5, you should know that level 5 will be affected. So clearly that's why the technical input of Salaries and Wages Commission is important, and it has addressed that issue many, many times. The other issue he mentioned about relativity, because people are mixing too many things together. The issue of relativity is an entirely a different thing, which is also auxiliary to the minimum wage. And the relativity issue is actually to now look at the grading system that we have in service, the various salary structures, which I think are more than 27, both in public and private sector. All of this will then form the consequential effect and relativity that will then be discussed and addressed. But first and foremost, Salaries and Wages Commission must, through its technical competence, usually what they do is they will have a team with all other agencies, all these tables, and there will be the consequential increase, which will then form part of the circular they will issue. So these have been the practice, and therefore it has not been limited to only one grade or one, no. That has not been the practice, and that's why I think possibly we need to remind ourselves where we're coming from, except we want to do something different. But usually from 1981, even to the last one, the 18,000 minimum wage, there was a table. And everybody actually on the table, depending on where you are. And that's why he mentioned the issue of what will be your benefit. Because usually it's also to address the huge gap of those that are actually below the ladder. Because what we are trying to do is to make sure that we have a national benchmark below which no employer of labor should pay a worker. So clearly, those increase at those levels and those at the highest level, it may not be the same percentage. And that's what Salaries and Wages Commission will do. And then once the table is out, everybody will actually conform with it. So this clearly is the issue. And there will be even consultation, because who will be consulted in the process of coming up with these details? So by now, we expect that Salaries and Wages Commission is on top of the issue. And that's why until that is done, even when you say pay today, until that table is done, what will guide ministries, department, agency in coming up with the payment schedule? That instrument is very, very important and vital. And that is the first instrument that ought to come out immediately after the assent to the bill by Mr. President, because it will be gazetted, and then that instrument will come out. So this is where we are. And therefore, let us not model the whole issue.
In other words, Comrade President, for the benefit of workers who were expecting that by the end of April, which was yesterday, that the minimum wage would have been in their pocket. Just tarry a while, because there are still consequential steps to be taken with regard to implementation. But still, while we are still on the issue of minimum wage, because there are a number of other matters, let's bring in again Comrade Musa Lawal. Comrade Musa Lawal, sometimes when the issue of implementation of minimum wage is, if the idea and then implementation, when they get to be discussed, there appears to be a concentration on the federal government. Yes, in this case, you have other tiers of government. You also have the private sector. Does organized labor foresee any challenges with the faithful implementation of the new Minimum Wage Act?
Usually, after minimum wage and the circular comes out, these employers and the employees in the private sector and other places go into negotiation so that they can effect, at least draw lines from the circular that has been given. It's always a very difficult task with the private employers because they think that minimum wage belongs to only the smallest people. Once they get to that level, they say, after all, you are above minimum wage. That's not it. That is not correct. The correct situation is that once minimum wage has been set, the whole system is dislocated. So it has to now work out a system where everybody benefits from it. Because if somebody, like he said, you are on 30,000 and somebody is already on 50, and you move from 18 to 30, obviously, you are now meeting up with people that are ahead of you before. That gap must be there. So it will work out after the circular has been received. We use it to negotiate with the private employers. It's a very difficult task. because we have faced it several times, but we must always win at the end of the day, because we let them see that you cannot stay here before and move to this place and remain the same. And the private sector, especially the unorganized private sector, that is where we have the greatest problem, unorganized. The organized ones, especially those ones from different parts of the country, they listen. And there's a negotiation on the table by the labor leaders as well as the employers, and they come to something. It may not be as good as what government gives, but certainly they do. But the unorganized ones, it's a difficult task, and we are ready for the challenge.
Sorry, Claire, I'm just wondering, part of implementation is one thing to negotiate the implementation, but there's always the nagging point about ability and capacity to pay.
Precisely.
Are you concerned?
Of course we are concerned. First of all, we all know that no one wants to part with 1 naira, even if he has it. That is the position of the employers. But with a concerted effort from the employees, especially the labor unions, we get to know that your business is doing well. And if it is doing well, we are entitled to benefit. And if the law comes for the country that, okay, we should move out, of course we must move. Whatever argument they put forward, at the end of the day, we are always able to come to terms with ourselves.
Okay, Kingsley, yes. just before we bring in the Mr. Neboragu, Comrade Ayuba, I know when the president assented to the minimum wage, there was a statement issued by NLC asking for one immediate implementation of the law, and then asking again for a meeting, with unions to determine, one, how to address the spin-off effects, and two, source of funding.
Let me try to, before addressing that issue, address the issue of ability to pay. Our initial demand was 66,500. On a negotiation table, and that's the principle of collective bargaining, where the employers were there, in private sector, NASIMA, under the platform of NECA, we negotiated and said, because of the ability to pay, can we reach a middle point? And through give and take, we then agreed to shift our position, taking all factors into consideration, including ability to pay. That's how we grudgingly accepted 30,000. So nobody should come at this point now to say it's the issue of ability to pay. All those issues were discussed. Even how to source funds for federal government and state government was discussed in the document. We made reference to many areas of loopholes, particularly taxation. What is our tax to GDP? It's the lowest in Africa. It's only the workers that pay tax. Those that declare billions of naira as profit, how much tax are they paying? Those collecting humongous salary, how much are they paying as tax? All over the world, the major source of revenue for every country is actually tax. If you go to UK, you take a cup of tea, you see a provision in your receipt, tax. There are many avenues that we can actually tap into and address this issue. And I agree with you. We have passed through 2 hurdles. First hurdle is agreeing on a figure. Second hurdle is to get a law in place, because in our own case, the minimum wage is under exclusive list. And the third one now is implementation. We have passed through this level severally. Yes, there will be challenge with implementation. And that's why we have sectorial platforms for our unions to engage the process. Employer will not willingly implement without pressure from the unions and from the workers. And having come all those far through this process, I am sure that we will also be able to take care of the next level. Then the other issue you mentioned about meeting, no, we never requested for a meeting. What we demanded for is the work of Salaries and Wages Commission. They have a team of technical people. If they so invite us, we will be there. But usually, they have the competence to actually be able to come with guideline. Because the issue of salary administration in Nigeria, by law, is under the purview of Salaries and Wages Commission. Once that is done, either at the private level, either at the state level, or local government level, we have collective bargaining platforms where those issues will come up. And then we'll be able to push the process and get the process of implementation through. Yeah, there will be some hurdles, but that is why the tripartite will then have to be ready to push the process. Once it is a law, there is no excuse that is good enough to say that you have a law, but yet I will not be able to implement it. And that's why this time around, there is also sanction. In fact, there is even the issue of interest accruing to the worker. If, for instance, the law is signed on the 18th, which by law, it takes effect from that day. If you don't pay, the law also provides now that there will be accrued interest to the worker at a prevailing interest rate in the bank.
Kingsley,
So those are issues that the union and workers will follow through.
Yes, Kingsley, usually when we have salary increases, there are, knock-on effects in the market forces. So I'm wondering if NLC is also contemplating on how, to address those effects. But I know Kingsley has a question for Mr.
Well, these are matters that will always continue to engage us. Let's bring in again Mr. Dan Neburago, who is Director in the Federal Ministry of Labour and Employment. The matters that will arise from the implementation probably will come to you later. That's my presumption, unless you want to speak on that. But there's an issue, and that is casualization. The NLC president has spoken about this. Those who are casual employees or casual workers will not, of course, be beneficiaries of the new minimum wage. And you have a rush of it, both in the government agencies and also in the private sector. What is the Ministry of Labour doing with regard to extirpating casualization of workers?
Well, thank you once again, but let me begin by saying that casualization is something that has been prohibited in our law. Any employer who is engaging in casualization is doing so illegally. And once we in the Ministry of Labour are made to be aware of such a practice, then such employers will be prosecuted. Casualization is there to the extent that employers are free to outsource certain categories of work. And even though you outsource certain categories of work, it does not mean that you should engage in unfair labor practices. It should not mean that you should not comply with the provisions of the law, and particularly the rights of workers, which, as Comrade has said, has been well defined in the ILO instruments as well as in our labor laws, basically the Convention 87 and 98. And indeed, all the core conventions, which are 8 of them, which Nigeria has ratified, one of the few countries that have ratified the core conventions. So and that is why we brought in the recruiter's license regime to check the excess practices of certain employers who casualize workers, even though the outsourcing has become a major thing in employment relationships now. So it is totally illegal, and the Ministry of Labour seriously frowns at casualization. And we are tackling a lot of employers. You mentioned the banks. You will have been aware of some of the efforts that previous ministers up to the present minister has been undertaking to discourage this casualization. And the unions themselves are there. The onus is particularly on the firm and the unions to report such practices wherever they exist to the Ministry of Labour, so that we tackle them. And you know that we have state labour officers across the federation with seasoned labour officers who have been empowered and well-trained to carry out inspections into these organizations, look into their books, and if they are, for instance, not paying, it is not correct anyway to say that anybody that's, because casualization is wrong anyway. So any employer, for instance, that is not paying the minimum wage on the basis that we have casual workers, it is wrong. And it is liable to prosecution.
Yeah, Mr. Neburago, you talked about the fact that those who are casualized, if once they make a report to you, then you can take action. But isn't it also the case that some of these workers who are under casual engagement feel that half bread is better than none? And so they will want to retain whatever they have and then proceed. That's one leg. Second leg is as follows. You talked about outsourcing. Does it, the outsourcing entity or the entity that provided the service already has these persons who are in his employ? You're not picking them from the street. What are the rules that appertain or relate to the employer whose services are then required by the company to outsource it and give it to them? They are in their let me not say employer, because if you are casualized, you're not necessarily on the books. But what happens? How do you deal with such entities?
There are rules. There are rules.
Wow,
and that the rules are
obeyed?
there in the recruiter's license rules and regulations. And any employer that wants to go into recruitment for the purpose of another employer is bound to be registered. It's first and foremost expected to register with the Ministry of Labour and have a license to be a recruiter of labour for a third party. So, and there are definite rules, and if such rules are broken, then such a employer is liable. There are defined rules to checkmate exploitative practices by such employers.
Yes,
There are different rules.
Are the rules there in the books, or are they effective? How effective have they been?
Effectiveness is relative, because if you say they are not effective, then it means therefore that, I mean, we are not doing our work. We, like I said, we carry out inspections, and sometimes when we go to inspections, we call each employer, for instance, in every employment organization, you have unions there, and we ask the unions, what is happening? As workers exploited, is there any element of indecent work in terms of the practices of these employers? And we deal with it appropriately. That I can assure you.
Okay, sorry,
I'm just wondering, Mr. Neburago, let's pause here in the meantime and go to Professor Richard Edubo again. Let's have a benefit of his experience, to also articulate this matter. Mr. Neburago is talking about, the unions getting in, and Comrade Waba already mentioned a point that is very well known, that namely these casual workers themselves cannot unionize in the first instance. And the unions often will not fight on behalf of those who are not his members. So what exactly are we seeing? We've been hearing for many years how how organized labor has been dealing with banks with regard to casualization, yet that practice continues to this moment, not just in the banking sector, but in several other sectors. That's why I asked the question earlier, whether this is a worker's nightmare or an employer's paradise.
We can call in aid the very statute that I said is inadequate. That is the Labour Act, because it's the only statute that appertains contract of employment formation. And that the provision of that statute, Section 7 of the Labour Act, is clear, and it takes care of this casualization thing. And it reads, not later than 3 months after a worker's continuous employment, it shall be an obligation on the employer to give to the worker written particulars of terms of employment, which are specified all those provisions as contained under that Section 7. For instance, if you've been working for me, you want the whole world to, you don't want the whole world to know that you're my worker. But I have consistently worked for you for 3 months and above. It is an obligation on the employer, for heaven's sake, to assume the responsibility of an employer to that very worker and be bound by the minimum conditions contained in that defective statute. That is why I talked about a redefinition of the term worker. Comrade Ayuba Waba is obviously thinking that I don't know enough to know that these core labor conventions have been ratified in Nigeria. So soon after Nigeria became independent, it went back to ratify Convention 87 and Convention 98, which form the core of the core labor conventions. We know this so well, and we have continued to give tutorials on this core. But I am saying, and if we cannot understand this, we would have missed the point. Some of those golden provisions contained in those core labor conventions as ratified in Nigeria are unfortunately allowed to be domesticated in a statute that means nothing to anybody exercising administrative, executive, technical, or professional functions as public officers or otherwise, which also by necessary implication includes officers in the private sector. We are saying that our trade unions should act in concert with government to redefine this very golden provision, because everything, if a worker is going to be benefited by it, it is premised on his status, whether he's a worker or not. That is why I'm calling in aid the definition of employee in the Employees Compensation Act of 2010, which is total and covers all the grounds. That is only one statute of the very many statutes in Nigeria. It does not regulate contract formation of employment formation. The only statute that regulates contract of employment formation is the act that I am condemning without venom. Section 9, subsection 6 of that very statute derives from that collective bargaining convention 98. And it is made to inure to the advantage only of those in the lowest rung of the ladder. And we are saying that it doesn't raise alarm. And my friend Comrade Ayuba Waba will say, we are already handling it. We are already handling it. How? So these provisions are there. They are inadequate. I talked about that section 20 of the Labor Act, which addresses redundancy. And that is termination of employment at the initiative of the employer convention. We lifted it from that to our own. Yet it is reserved only for those defined to be worker. It does not cover the ground for everybody, for heaven's sake.
I'm wondering, Professor Richard Edubo, we're still on the issue of casualization. What exactly are you saying? Is it that because of the defects you pointed out with regard to the Labor Act and therefore the formation of contract? Contract can be formed under common law or also under the Act. Does that justify casualization? That it's inimical to the interests of those who are working today, whether they are defined as workers or employees?
A statute defines who to benefit from it. Here with us, the statute also knows that there may be many persons who will be exploited violently by reason of the fact that they are not regarded as employees. They may be regarded as not being employees into contract for services. And to that extent, they are not regarded as employees. And that section of the law, even in its inadequate sense, says not later than 3 months after a worker has consistently worked for an employer, he shall cease to be a casual worker. The employer assumes full responsibility. Not later. When I was inspecting officer, an authorized labor officer with Federal Ministry of Employment, Labor and Productivity, I drew attention to all of this. And I drew the attention of various employers of labor to their inadequacies for not regarding those who have worked with them for a long time as not being employees. I earnestly hope that Federal Ministry of Employment, Labor and Productivity will challenge the inspecting officers, empower the inspecting officers. Again, that is not only limited to the Ministry of Employment, Labor and Productivity. Government should fund Ministry of Labor so that it doesn't appear that we want to weaken Ministry of Labor to benefit some employers of labor. They should fund Ministry of Labor so that inspecting officers should go all out and ensure that employers of labor comply with that Section 7 of the Labor Act, even though it is limited to certain category of the workforce. But then again, I am emphasizing that a better thing to do is to redefine. And my friend is saying that we are already working on it. This status of worker, definition of worker, is a carryover. It's not by this administration. It's contained in the Labor Code, replaced by the Labor Act that is extant, which we got from the benevolent dictatorship of Yakubu Gowon in 1974. In all respect, except in one insignificant section, it has remained like that up till today. And we are saying that we are working on it. We are working on it. How long will Nigerian workers wait for there to be a redefinition of the term worker? For heaven's sake, it is pathetic that in this country we are allowing it, and we have continued to say that it is being worked on. Please, we should do something. The whole problem we are talking about now hovers around the need for a redefinition of the term worker. Elsewhere, in many other countries, which we ought to look up to now, whenever workers, there is mutuality of obligation. A worker has continued to work for an employer and he has no other person to look up to, even if he is into a contract for services. It gets
Professor Richard Edubo, thank you very much. I mean, a number of points that you have raised, which, of course, we probably will not have enough time to to deal with. I see, as you are speaking, Comrade Ayuba Waba, Comrade Musa Lawal, they are all, indicating that they disagree with you. There are a number of points. Because what is the real value of saying that, okay, you are not a worker as defined under the Labour Act, and yet, by the formation of your contract, assuming you are in the public service and you are appointed as an administrative officer, your terms of employment are, of course, they are referable to the rules of the service. They are also referable to the contract of your engagement. So does that not make you a beneficiary of all that will appertain? Are we saying now that because you're not defined as a worker in the Labour Act, that whether you are a technical professional or otherwise, that you are not impacted by benefits that will inure to workers? But these are points to deal with. Claire, you wanted to raise some
I just have, so that we can cap up this issue of casualization. Now, because of the dynamics of the economy, someone would, of course, would rather choose to, accept the casual status, than nothing at all. Like Kingsley said, have read is better than none. So, in the absence of a provision in the law that protects, casualization, how can the casual worker be protected by the union?
Well, one of the issues that looks like contradiction to me is that the Ministry of Labour accepts here that there are people who are supposed to employ for others. And, of course, there are people who have direct employment. And he also accepted that the fact that the people who are employing for others, those employees are not under the union, under the labor law. It's a contradiction to me because a worker is supposed to be a worker. If I'm employing you, there are terms and conditions of service that I'm coming into. So the issue of casualization has come because we are not even ready to do anything about it. The two labor centers have been fighting casualization. But I assure you that if government can give a license for people to casualize, and at the same time we now say that they are not working under the others, then there's a problem. Why do we have people who should employ for others in the first place? I'm working in First Bank, and I'm not working in First Bank. Somebody else is paying me. It is not correct. I think we have a concerted effort to kill casualization in Nigeria. It is possible. Because we're not giving any license for anybody to employ for others, except there are extenuating circumstances. So that's the way I look at it.
Yes, precisely. If, Comrade Ayuba, if in the event that, an employer is, by one reason or the other, unable to employ, of course, we know maybe challenges of finance and all that, how can the person working as a casual be protected? There must be a way. There must be something.
Thank you very much. First, our law does not approve casualization. In fact, the present Labour Act provides that once you work for 3 months, 6 months, you are supposed to be assimilated into the system. But it's deliberate because casuals have lesser condition of service, precarious condition of service than full-time employees. So it's deliberate. And that is why in the Labour Palace it's referred to as modern-day slavery. Those engaging in casualization does this deliberately. Recently, you are aware, we engage MTN nationwide. Because what we are saying is that, despite the fact that the law said after 3 months you permanent him, they keep reviewing the contract. After 3 months, you are terminated and re-engage again. Deliberately. So clearly speaking, there should be partnership between government and labor. Because in most casual situations, they don't allow unions to exist. Whereas our law said a worker has a right to belong to a trade union for the purpose of protecting his right and interest. The first thing they will do is to deny those workers the right to belong to unions. In fact, in some organizations, once you want to belong to the union, they sack you. And that's why we have to engage MTN. The workers want to belong to a union, they sack some of them. They close the service center in Jos. We fought until we are able to picket the entire office across the country one day. And that's how we now came to the negotiation table. It was agreed that all of them will now be unionized because that is the first step. The first step of asserting your rights and protecting your interests, human and trade union, is for you to have a platform to do that. But we have not relented. Whether you are unionized or not, once an issue of casualization comes in place, we unions will protect you. In fact, somebody from Lagos, a very pathetic situation, let me tell you, he lost his eye. Because he's a casual, the company gave him only 20,000 naira. We have to fight back. until he got full compensation. This is what happens. These people are Nigerians, but yet they work under precarious situation. So we are not yet there. Many employers are exploiting this lacuna. I cannot say it's even lacuna in our law, but this practice
so is
to
it
undermine the interests of Nigerians.
Is it
but
a fight that labor will escalate?
Certainly.
All right.
Once workers, we have opened the floodgate to every worker, whether in public or private. If you are under this category, report to us. We'll engage the employer. Recently, we did with Abuja Environmental Protection Agency. Those street sweepers, there are more than 500 casualties. And we thank God they responded. At the level of the Minister and Permanent Secretary, they responded. We had a collective bargaining agreement. They have been assimilated into the system.
Yeah, that's
so
why.
It's work in progress. We need to protect our citizens from. In many other countries, the law protects this vulnerable group from exploitation.
All right, Comrade, President, and gentlemen, let's take a short break now. When we return, we'll try and take some of the tweets and then get into one or two closing issues.
Chief. Good morning, sir. You are here already?
No, now my spirit there, my body there for house. What kind of question is that? Were you not the one that fixed this meeting for 8 a.m.? You are now coming by 10 a.m. and start asking me jab questions.
But Chief, now, I'm sorry. Don't you also go late for meetings sometimes? You know now, African time.
No more African time. And no more pancaking of face during office hours. At the end of the day, we will lose valuable time. We will not make progress. If we want to move this nation forward, we must treat business as business and respect time. Change begins with me.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry. Can we go for the meeting now, Chief?
Better.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
You are watching NTA, Nigerian Television Authority. For more information and news updates, visit our website at www.nta.ng, or you can follow us on Twitter at NTA News Now, or you can like us on Facebook at NTA Network News. Stay connected on our YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/NTA News Online. Watch our live stream at www.nta.ng/live. NTA, you can't beat the rich.
Right, quite interesting discussion, I would say. I'm sure you're catching on. We've got lots of tweets as expected. Let's quickly take them. Sunny Michael or Marco J tweets, the idea of immunity, in quote, that has made some governors small gods in some states should be abolished if equal rights that labor union advocates must succeed. Now, some governors are so arrogant, he says, in the name of immunity, that they refuse to pay salaries for 38 months and nobody questions them.
All right, let's go to Festus Akimboyewa. It says government at all levels must do more to improve the working conditions of workers. Non-payment of salaries is akin to slavery, and it must stop.
And Shuaibu Alkali tweets, Nigerian workers are praying this 1st of May 2019 is positive result, unlike the past when many speeches were delivered and no result. Even the 18,000 naira is not fully implemented in some states. So our hope on this 30,000 naira story would be different. Workers, enjoy your day.
Dele Jack Solomon, what will it cost the government to better the lives of Nigerian workers? Government should realize that the welfare of the people is the reason why governments exist.
All right, and this one is from Adam Mo. He says, Happy Workers' Day to all enterprising Nigerians, especially our NTA Good Morning Nigeria team. Your sacrifice is noticed and appreciated. God bless Nigerian workers. God bless Nigeria.
And Ibrahim Modu Aj tweets, it says, this year's Workers' Day coincides with the struggle by labor to increase the minimum wage. That's already been achieved. The federal and state government should immediately implement the new minimum wage. Workers, on the other hand, should be corrupt-free and committed to work.
And Law Alpha C, workers are treated with levity in Nigeria, where political office holders who come to grab and enrich themselves are celebrated.
Okay, let's go to our second set of tweets now. Cecilia Okoroma tweets, as we celebrate May Day, NLC must preach commitment to work so that we can move to the next level in development.
All right, Ibrahim Modu Aji treats traders justifiably planning to increase price of foods, commodities with the hearing of the new minimum wage. Price control became imminent in our markets through policy formulation to curb incessant and unjustifiable inflation in the market. Happy Workers' Day.
Ale Chenu Yahaya tweets, the issue of workers being called contract workers or contract staff is a major one in Nigeria. Every year we discuss this matter and nothing ever appears to be done. Please let the NLC president explain a contract worker to us Nigerians.
All right, he will do that in just a moment. But Jim Martin's tweets, I must appreciate Comrade Waba and all union leaders for working tirelessly. I imagine what reasons governors give for not paying salaries. My question to Waba is, what role is NLC playing to ensure these governors pay the new minimum wage? What action should defaulting governors expect?
And Chris Simeon tweets, says, let's work harder to promote Nigeria and make both the public and private sectors wax stronger. Happy Workers' Day.
And Suleiman Sanusi tweets, if VAT is increased, the effort made by the organized labor will be literally back to square one. It's like giving it with one hand and ending up receiving it with the other. Economically, it doesn't make any sense for the masses.
All right, we have other tweets coming in from Akeju Olagbaju, Kuso Amo, Comrade Ungala, Josh, Festus Akimboewa, and all others. They're all talking about the Workers' Day and the milestones that have been achieved. We'd like to thank you for your contributions. Now, for the amount of time that we have left, one issue that I would like us to dwell on very briefly this time as well. The Nigerian industrial environment has witnessed a lot of unrest. Wildcat strikes every now and then from all professions, all sectors, either in the academia or otherwise. I'm sure, Mr. President of the NLC, you know what I'm talking about. That also tied up with the fact that workers' productivity is often called to question. What can be done to reduce significantly the high incidence of strikes that do not, of course, help in national development?
Well, thank you very much for that very important question. Before I address the question, I think it's good I try to inform the public and also the prof about the process of reviewing our labor laws. Currently, as I said, those laws were obsolete. They are laws of 1973 and 1974. And ILO, with their technical support, have brought the tripartite, because labor laws can only be reviewed through a tripartite process. And the process, as I said, is ongoing. The reports are ready, where a comprehensive review of the Trade Union Act, Labor Act, and all the relevant laws will be done. We have done the first stage. But since they have not been passed by the National Assembly, and some of the issues have been overtaken by events, we thought it's good to do revalidation. But those bills are already at the National Assembly. And we have called them back to do revalidation and also address some of those issues so that it can be enacted. That's the process. So to just think that nothing is happening is not correct. Secondly, on the issue of strike, even in the best, strike is not a tea party. Even unions don't like to go on strike. And even in developed economies, as I talk to you today, I can tell you every country around the world where there is industrial issue. The last one is in the US, where the teachers done too. France are doing that. Belgium did that 2 weeks ago, all the transport system. So it's not a tea party. Usually, if you have a very robust industrial relations system, issues should be resolved on the negotiation table through consultation. And that is why, as Labour, we have insisted that this platform is lacking in Nigeria. The National Labour Advisory Council, which is supposed to play that role, 4 years down the line, it has not been inaugurated. It's a major labour market institution that has the backing of ILO convention, tripartite negotiation, tripartite consultation, social dialogue. There should be a platform where all issues from all sectors, we can bring it to the table, resolve them on the table without allowing the issue to actually degenerate into strike action. That is the problem. And that's why if we had NLC, and particularly Labour, including organized private sector, said, why can't we inaugurate this National Labour Advisory Council? It's akin to like National Council on Labour. where issues in South Africa, the minimum wage is discussed at NALDI. NALDI is like the counterpart of National Labour Advisory Council. You don't need to have some ad hoc committees.
We have to.
Those are the issues.
Neburago from the Federal Ministry of Labour. Why are we having this gap in terms of the council? And how are you coping with the incessant strikes by the various unions?
Well, in terms of strikes, there must always be conflict. That's something we must understand. There must always be disagreement between the employers of labor and workers over terms and conditions of employment. That is bound to happen. It happens all over the world. But what is important is that we must, when such disagreements happen, we must come to the negotiation table and seek for ways and means of resolving the grievances or the disputes. I think it is the absence of certain parties not to subject themselves to the collective bargaining process that ultimately leads to industrial action in the form of strikes. So, and the processes are all laid down in the extant regulations, the steps and processes that must be taken in terms of the settlement of trade disputes. But impatience, I think, on my own part, from my understanding, is one of the reasons responsible for strike. Because if we follow the process, conciliation, arbitration, and we go to the National Industrial Court, and if you are aggrieved on the issue of fundamental rights, you go to the appellate court. By the time you exhaust these processes, the strikes will not occur in the system.
Why don't you have a Labour Council?
There is a Labour Council. We had a meeting. I think maybe we want to ask that question in terms of the issue raised by Congress President in terms of inauguration. But the council has been meeting over issues. In fact, it is because of... Well, no, that is... No, but that is not to say that it's not been working if it has not met for 4 years. But you will understand too that because of the effort of council, that has been the reason why we have taken a lot of policy decisions. For instance, the last Maritime Labour Convention, Maritime Labour Convention of 2006, as a product of negotiation or consultation by the National Labour Council. So it is not totally...
All right, Mr. Neburago, thank you. We would have loved to ask how you're dealing with the issues of occupational hazards that comrades raise and other aspects of, working environment. Just in less than a minute, if you can speak to that.
Yeah, we have set up the occupational safety and health policy. And like Comrade has also said, the Occupational Safety and Health Act is one of the things that we are working on now to ensure that there's a new occupational safety. By the time all these things are in place, the implementation will also take place, and then workers will have a health and safety environment under which they work.
All right, Mr. Dan Neburago, Director of Productivity at the Ministry of Labour and Employment, we'd like to thank you very much for sharing your day with us. We'd also like to appreciate Mr. Musa Lawal, who is Secretary General, Trade Union Congress, TUC. Many thanks to you. And from our Benin Network Center, Professor Richard Udubo, Professor of Law and former Dean, Faculty of Law, University of Benin. Prof, thank you very much for your insights. And finally, but certainly not the least, our President Comrade Ayuba Waba, President